Give me the okay. Right. Hello, hello, you three. Nice to have you all here. As you know, our speaker for today is Julian Cribb, who's an author and science communicator. His career includes appointments as scientific editor for the Australian newspaper, director of national awareness for the CSIRO, creator and editor of newspapers such as the National Farmer and the Sunday Independent, and he's a member of numerous scientific boards and advisory panels, and president of national professional bodies for agricultural journalism and science communication. He's got literally thousands of articles, science media releases, and 12 books. Now, I might just mention some of his books before we move over to Adrian. I've had, I'll say pleasure, but it's probably more like my eyes have been opened in certain areas in reading a couple of his books recently. So five of his books, perhaps worth mentioning, out of the 12, The Coming Famine, which concerns the global food crisis and what we can do about it. The Poison Planet, and how exposure to man-made chemicals is putting your life at risk. Thirdly, Surviving the 21st Century, tackling the existential crisis facing humanity. His recent books include Food or War, discusses the central role of food in global stability, arguing that the modern food system, if left unchecked, risks precipitating widespread conflict due to its unsustainable practices. And lastly, worth mentioning is Earth Detox, which Julian sent to me because he knows I'm a chemist by training. And perhaps I was part of the problem with many other chemists in society in general. And the Earth Detox describes the impacts of man-made chemicals throughout our environment and why we must clean up our presentation. So am I right in saying, Adrian, that you're happy to talk for 30 minutes and then have an extended question and answer?
Absolutely, yes. Very happy. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just trying to put up my slideshow now. I'm not familiar with this computer, so I'm not getting onto the... How do I show the slide?
No, you're doing it already. You're already.
No, that's not a slide. This is the...
Oh, sorry.
That's the editing.
Down here.
We can see it.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's the editing page. It's not the slide page.
You just have to use it as normal. Go to the view slideshow.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah.
So sorry about that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today to talk about the question of whether we humans can actually agree to survive in the 21st century. So I'm sorry, I'm getting my screen blocked. I don't know how to avoid that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Right.
Yeah.
What is C?
Okay. We're living through the greatest crisis in our million-year history on the planet. That's the Earth emergency. And this is a converging catastrophe created by humanity's relentless exploitation of our planet's finite resources, its natural systems, and its resilience. Yet no government anywhere on Earth or global organization yet has a plan to address it or to arrest the compounding damage. Now, what you're seeing there is where science has been warning us for over 50 years that we're hurtling towards disaster, driven by 10 massive interconnected threats. These threats cannot be solved one by one because they're all connected. They must be solved in ways that make none of them worse. and they all share four main drivers: overpopulation, overconsumption, overpollution, and money. Now, starting off with the ecology side of things, well, we've wiped out 73% of all mammals, birds, fish, and reptiles since the 1970s. 90% of large land animals have been extinguished worldwide, and extinction rates are many times what they were in the past before humans came along. Extinction is actually today 3 times faster than when the dinosaurs got eclipsed, believe it or not. And ecological collapse like this doesn't just threaten animals, wild animals and forests and things. It threatens us too, because this is the cradle of life on Earth, and it supports us. And you can see what E.O. Wilson thinks. I don't think the world can sustain this rate of destruction. The next, we talk about resources. I mean, every year we humans are using 105 billion tons of resources. And yet the Earth only produces 60 billion tons of resources renewably. So we're running into serious resource debt in a great many areas. Water is the absolute classic one. We're losing soil at irretrievable rates. Forests we're losing fish in the oceans. The amount of dead zones in the oceans has doubled in the last couple of decades. 90% of our fisheries worldwide are either maxed out or in decline. And every single one of us consumes 12 tons of resources a year. And this is on track to increase to around about 18 tons by the 2060s. The Earth can only support 7 tons per person. So we're going to be way, way beyond what the Earth can sustain in the long run. Now, global poisoning is the one that Stephen was mentioning to you. I mean, besides emitting a lot of carbon, we also emit 220 billion tons of all kinds of chemicals from human activity. There are 350,000 man-made chemicals. And you've all read about plastic microparticles and how they're absolutely everywhere. They're in us, in the wildlife, in the fish we eat, in our unborn children. They're penetrating every single part of the living world, and they're poisoning it. The WHO, World Health Organization, estimates there are nearly 14 million human deaths a year, that's 1 in 4, are related to chemicals or chemical poisoning in one form or another. So it's a quarter of all humans are currently dying as a result of this inundation of chemicals on our world. This is something we know about. It is the worst case of deliberate manslaughter in the entire history of humanity. It's much worse than war. And yet we're doing very little about it. And just to give you an idea of the impact that this is having, since the mid-1970s, the human IQ has declined by 13 points. It's currently falling at around 3.5 points per decade, right? And the reason for that is that basically neurotoxic chemicals are taking out our brains. There's an explosion in brain diseases in the last 20 years, 20 or 30 years. So and this medical scientists are reporting on this, but governments are not paying any attention at all. Well, you all know about the nuclear war, and perhaps you noticed that Donald Trump twice tried to grab the bloody nuclear codes in the last 48 hours, and he was refused by the US military. So we are on the brink. The Chicago group, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, estimates we're 85 seconds to midnight. There's more than enough nukes to take us out if they all got used, if a lot of them got used anyway. But, even a small nuclear war of 50 to 100 nukes could result in starvation enough to kill 2 billion people. So, it could create a small nuclear winter, which might last for up to 10 years, and that would cause many countries to starve. I mean, for example, temperatures in the wheat belt of Australia would drop by 4 degrees. So, this is really serious. Even a small nuclear war is not something that we can take lightly. And so far, less than half the countries in the world have agreed to ban these awful weapons. Climate, you're more than familiar with. We are currently on track with the amount of carbon we're producing to reach plus 4 degrees by 2100. Now, let me tell you as an agricultural journalist that plus 4 degrees, basically, you won't be able to grow any wheat crops in Australia or any other grain crops. Our food supply will probably be enough to feed 2 or 3 billion people, not 26 billion people. So when we get to temperatures like that, there is going to be colossal famine worldwide and huge numbers of people migrating in all directions. But that's not the worst part of it. That's just man-made climate change. But by warming the Earth, we are liberating all of this methane off the bottom of the oceans, off the tundra, out of the tundra and out of the tropical swamps. And this methane is 80 times more powerful than carbon dioxide as a climate generator. And that could warm the Earth by between 5 to 15 degrees more than we have at the moment. We honestly don't know, but once the Earth starts emitting this stuff, and it is starting to emit it, there is absolutely nothing that humans can do to stop it. So if we go beyond a certain point, and that's probably going to be reached in the next 20 or 30 years, we are going to be unable to cool the Earth in time to save ourselves. So climate is becoming pretty desperate at the moment. And of course, you have almost every government on Earth, especially the US government, the Australian government, the Russian government, the Saudi government, all doing whatever they can to heat the planet and cook our grandchildren. Okay, now I've mentioned the fragility of the food supply. The food supply is fragile, basically not only because population is growing, but we're running out of fresh water. And the big cities, the giant megacities of the world, with populations of 10, 20, and 30 million people each, are taking the water away from the farmers. So the farmers haven't got the water to grow food. We're losing topsoil at staggering rates. Between 45 and 75 billion tonnes of topsoil are lost every year, mostly through agriculture. Now that's 8 kilos per person per day. So that's a bucket load of soil just to feed you, basically. So we're seeing those kinds of losses. There's the climate impact on top of that, and then other factors like the loss of pollinators, the spread of agricultural poisons around the world, and so on. So the food system that we have created, which has been enormously successful over the last 7,000 years, is starting to stagger. There are answers and solutions to this, let me tell you, but they are not being adopted at the moment because people are not scared enough, basically. There's a lot of talk about technology and what can go wrong with it, particularly artificial intelligence. But let me tell you, every technology, including coal, including agriculture, and so on, can cause terrible problems if it is overused or it is used unwisely. So here's a list of current technologies that have not been properly evaluated in terms of their impact on human safety. AI is, of course, part of them, but so is universal surveillance, so are man-made diseases, so is the nano products and things like that, robotics and things like that, geoengineering. All of these technologies all have the potential for bad outcomes if they are not controlled by society. And most of them are controlled by billionaires, not by society. So we've got a real danger, a technological threat to humans at this scale of population. Pandemics, well, we've had 9 of them since the year 2000, and there's a couple of them still bumbling along in the background. I mean, 40 million people have died of AIDS, and they're still dying of it. They're driven by overpopulation primarily, the fact that there's so many of us now that we swap diseases very easily. But cutting down the rainforests, many viruses that are new viruses like Ebola and Marburg and so on are coming out of the rainforests to infect us because they're running out of animals that they can infect. Their hosts are being destroyed, so they're turning humans into the new host. Megacities are huge concentrations of human beings which swap diseases very readily. Travel, a deadly disease can travel from one end of the earth to the other in 24 hours. And so travel is the major vector of infectious disease worldwide. And of course, there's bad science. There's over 60 laboratories worldwide busy inventing new diseases. Heaven knows why, but there's no oversight. It's totally immoral, this science. Anyway, the World Health Organization says there's more plagues on the way, and I don't see any reason to doubt that particular claim. Population, which of course is a favourite topic with you ladies and gentlemen. As you all know, there's 8.3 billion humans at the moment, and this has risen from 2.5 billion in 1950. So in other words, in my lifetime, we've more than trebled the human population. And it's still growing at around about 70 million people a year. And it is the principal driver of all the mega threats. It's not that agriculture or coal or artificial intelligence are dangerous on their own. It's the amount that they're overused that actually causes the problems. So it's the huge numbers of humans multiplied by our use of technology that actually causes the problem. But here's the good news. I mean, women worldwide are cutting their fertility. They've cut it by more than half since the 1970s, from 5 babies per woman down to 2.4 at the moment. So we're getting very close to zero population growth. And with any luck, we'll get to peak people, zero population growth, worldwide in about the 2060s or 2070s. But as Corey Bradshaw will tell you, the Earth can only actually carry 2.5 billion people at our current levels of resource consumption. So that is the major limiting factor. We're currently overpopulated by a factor of 3. Now, any farmer that you meet can tell you what happens if you put 1,000 sheep in a paddock that is only big enough to carry 250. That's what we're doing with the planet Earth, and we're using energy and other chemical inputs to expand the envelope of what Earth can carry. But that envelope does not increase the amount of resources. It'll go pop sooner or later. And all animal populations, when they get into overpopulation phase, they crash. It's an absolutely solid rule of biology that if you outrun your resources, your population undergoes a huge crash. So our population is coming down, whether we do it voluntarily or it just happens naturally. And the other thing that's really making it very difficult to do anything about this is the enormous spread of absolute rubbish on the internet and in the media and in politics and in industry. There is a huge amount of absolute lies being told and being disseminated via social media and lobby groups and political groups and things like that. When you have false information circulated, particularly anti-science information, any basis of a decision that you make is going to be wrong. Doesn't matter whether you're a business person, whether you're an academic, whether you're a government, if you base your decisions on false information, it will be a bad decision. But we're getting now people like the oil industry have got a $7 billion lie factory system set up whereby they disseminate false information worldwide to deceive the public and to deceive governments into allowing them to keep on producing more and more oil, more and more carbon dioxide. So lies are now $1 billion global industry. Take it from me, I used to work for Rupert Murdoch, and he is one of the chief disseminators of lies. His media makes its money. It gets advertising dollars by getting enough idiots to watch it, like Fox News, and deceiving them as to the real facts. So misinformation is actually undermining, if not destroying, our ability to save ourselves. And this is a real concern. Okay, so this human emergency that I've talked about, these 10 threats coming together, there are 4 great imaginary drivers to it at the moment. Politics. Nothing you hear in politics these days is true any longer. They all lie like bastards. In fact, nearly all of them do anyway. Very few politicians tell the truth nowadays. Religion wants you to believe in a benign deity or deities, something like that, but they're not asking you to understand what is happening to the world, but to put your faith in something that probably doesn't exist according to all the other religions. The human narrative, the stories we tell about ourselves, are always about the hero surviving. whereas the hero won't survive in what I'm telling you. And money is a complete figment of the human imagination. It does not exist in the real world. It does not exist in any other species or on any other planet that we know of. And yet we're using it to destroy our world. Money is the main driver of deforestation, of overfishing, of overfarming and land clearing, things like that. So that's what's pushing all these things along. So we need to get real about what is actually destroying our world, and have a proper understanding, or we can't fix it. You cannot solve a problem if you don't know what that problem consists of. Okay, well, as I've said before, all of these threats are interconnected. You can't solve them one at a time. You've got to solve them in ways that that doesn't make individual threats any worse. And to do it, they cannot be solved by nations. Nations are too busy bickering and fighting and squabbling with one another. They are not interested in saving the human species. They're only interested in pursuing their short-term national interest at the expense of some other nation, usually. And very few of them are taking a responsible view of what is necessary for our grandchildren to survive. Okay, so nations are a tremendously a bad thing. If we're going to solve this problem, we need to start thinking together as citizens of Earth about this problem, not as individual Australians or Americans or Russians or Chinese or Brazilians or whatever. Thinking as nations will destroy us, and it already is. But that's why, because nations cannot agree, there is no agreement. It's why the United Nations is a mess, because nations cannot agree. And there is no plan to deal with these threats because nations cannot agree. So, this is something that I've said many times. Unless we actually agree to survive, we probably won't. So how do we agree to survive? What could we do? Well, I'm proposing, or the Council for the Human Future is proposing, that we, first of all, form an Earth System Treaty. Now, this is a legal agreement which would be signed by most of the countries and most of the people on Earth, agreeing that we want to preserve a habitable planet for our grandchildren. It's that simple. So in other words, we need to overcome these threats and develop a habitable Earth. Now, everyone says, oh, treaties, what do they matter? Well, if you don't have an agreement to survive, your chances of survival are very, very low. So we've got to start off with an agreement. And that agreement has to be that we will try to live within the safe boundaries of planet Earth. So what might such a treaty encompass? For example, it would certainly encompass a crash climate program. It would certainly encompass the current treaty to ban all nukes, which only 79 countries have so far signed. It would certainly encompass an agreement to get rid of all the chemical poisons that are damaging our genes and our health worldwide. It would certainly encompass rewilding the planet, putting back the forests, the grasslands, the wetlands, and all the things that support life that we have destroyed. It would certainly encompass developing renewable food for all, rather than a system that self-destroys. It would undoubtedly encompass a circular world economy where we waste nothing. Remember, I said we currently consume 105 billion tons of materials every year. Now, if we just kept on reusing those materials instead of throwing them away, then we would have an economy that doesn't destroy the world. Currently, we throw away 93% of all the materials that we actually mine or extract from the Earth. If we had a World Technology Convention to control these out-of-control, mega-powerful technologies, if we had a worldwide agreement to voluntarily lower the population, and I'll speak some more about that, if we had a World Truth Commission that basically simply pointed out when people were telling lies and just exposed that to the public. And if we had an Earth standard currency, and I'm happy to talk about that later, but that's money that doesn't destroy the planet. It's money that helps us to repair the planet, in fact. But all of this involves us becoming an Earth citizen. And an Earth citizen is simply somebody who believes in handing a habitable planet to their children and their grandchildren. And to do that, we have to tackle these 10 threats. But we all have to have a personal commitment. It's not good enough to leave this to governments because they will not do anything about it. Every individual on Earth must do their bit. Here, we must curb the overconsumption, curb the pollution, curb the wars and all of those things. And we've got to take control of our own destiny. Right, I think probably we loaded the wrong slideshow, so I haven't got the population slides on this one.
Is it on the other presentation?
It's on the other presentation, yes.
Oh, excuse me.
But you can put me on and I can answer questions in the meantime. As I mentioned earlier in the talk, the human species is currently about overpopulated by a factor of 3 or 4 on the planet. And I'm quoting Corey Bradshaw, Paul Ehrlich, Mathis Wackernagle, a whole lot of very distinguished scientists who've been working on this for many decades. They've measured what the Earth can carry and what we've actually got. So we've got 8.3 billion on a planet that can carry 2.5 billion long-term at current material rates of consumption. Now, how do you know when you're overpopulated? Well, basically, any animal is overpopulated if it is destroying its environment. So if the water is becoming polluted, the forests are being cut down, the fish population is shrinking, the climate is getting worse, you know, the atmosphere is full of unbreathable toxins, there's pollution everywhere around you. These are all scientific indicators that humans are overpopulated to buggery, to coin a phrase. Can we do anything about it? Yes, we can. And women are the world leaders in doing this. Women have been lowering their fertility consistently for nearly 50 years worldwide. There are many countries now that are below 0 population growth. Our own country, Australia, is below ZPG if we didn't have migration. America would be below ZPG without immigration. Britain would be below ZPG. China is way down. They don't need a single child policy any longer. They're well below 0 population growth. So it's happening naturally. Where it's not happening mainly is in sub-Saharan Africa. Countries to the north and south of Africa, the birth rates are falling, as they have in every other part of the world. But in the very poor middle of Africa, they're still, you know, up around the 3, 4, 5 babies per woman. But that's going to come down in due course. But we can help it to come down. And the answer is to supply family planning to every woman on Earth who wants it. And the cost of doing that is less than half the price of 1 nuclear submarine. So if Australia resigned from AUKUS and didn't buy those stupid nuclear submarines from America, we could afford to underwrite global family planning on our own. Because that's what the government's planning to spend, I think, $700 billion buying submarines we don't need. So, you know, what I'm saying is it's really cheap. And the women of the world will do this autonomously. We don't need to persuade them. They already know what to do. They've been doing it for a long time. All right, men get in the road occasionally. But, you know, as women come to achieve positions of leadership and influence in our society and societies the world over, this will become the dominant paradigm. But we do need to educate people about the dangers of overpopulation. We do need to end these stupid governments paying people money to have more babies, right? Like Donald Trump's America pays people $1,000 to have a kid. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous. But, you know, above all, we need wise women in positions of leadership worldwide, because I believe that women are the natural leaders of this century, simply because women do not start wars. Men always start wars. Well, think of the last, 100 wars, if you like. almost all of them were started by men or by male-dominated governments. I can't think of a single woman who started a war, and don't say Mrs. Thatcher because she didn't start that war. It was started by Argentinian generals. Oh, I need to change slide. Okay. As for the message that we could put out to try to persuade people to have fewer babies, I think we invite people to have one child fewer than they would otherwise have had. So if you were planning to have 3 babies, have 2. If you were planning to have 2 babies, have 1. If you were planning to have 1 baby, have none. And there are huge numbers of young people these days who are already planning to have none. I saw a survey in Michigan last year where 40% of young people said that they were not intending to have children. So being childless is catching on among the young at an amazing rate. And I want to point out that advocating fewer births is also advocating for less human suffering, less poverty, less disease, less war, and less needless deaths. People who advocate for increasing the birth rate, they're concealing from you the fact that they are actually advocating increases in poverty, disease, and war. You know, that's what Elon Musk and co want. So we need to argue seriously about the virtues. I mean, every child born today deprives every other child of a little more resources, of these scarce resources on the earth. So every child born today is an infringement on the rights of every other child, now that we're past sustainable population. So we need to help people to understand that depopulation down to a balanced level, a level that's in balance with the Earth's ability to support, is the only way that our species is going to survive in the long term. And also that managing our birth rate down, giving women the power to reduce their fertility, is far better than undergoing a crash where millions, billions of people die in terrible ways, in famine, war, and other forms of suffering. So depopulation is justice for future humans. And, you know, we owe that to our grandchildren, and we owe them a habitable earth. That's all I have to say on that one. So I'm happy to take questions or enter into discussion on any of these points.
I think Jock's got his hand up.